Time. If you ask, someone who's in the community, like, how do you want me to refer to you? What kind of language do you want me to use when I'm around you? They would be more than happy to comply because they don't want to be referred to in a way that they are not happy about. And it's confusing and it's hard. And I really appreciate any people that aren't in the LGBT community who are actively trying to understand it better because it is really confusing. Even I get confused by it sometimes. So it's a lot to deal with. But just asking, it really means so much, and it helps people feel safer, at school, in communities. The fact that you are actively trying to get to know their identity is really, really helpful. So if you aren't sure about something, just ask, and that's a really big help.
I appreciate all of those comments so much, and I just did a patient empowerment lecture last night in the library, and what I tell people is, you are the world's expert on you. You are the world's expert on you. Nobody can tell you who you are, right? It doesn't matter what their degrees are. It doesn't matter, what positions of power they're in. So that's why, asking and listening and hearing and respecting is so important. Let's talk a little bit about media portrayal of LGBTQ plus community. That's one of the things that we were talking about here on the stage, and I think it's a really compelling topic.
Typically, when I see LGBT people portrayed in the media, it's typically in a funny, amusing way, which is not the case most of the time. It's usually there's the gay character who's super flamboyant and super the gay boy who's always really feminine, but not all gay boys are like that. And the lesbian who's the comedic relief of the group, and it's not helpful at all. And when you portray people LGBT people in the media like this, it's so harmful because there's young people who are questioning their identity, and they look to the media and they see these people who are just living stereotypes, and they think that they have to be like that in order to be valid in their identity. And it causes a lot of internalized homophobia, which is when a gay person is arguing with themselves about who they are because they were brought up believing that maybe they're religious or something, but they were brought up believing that gay people are wrong and that people shouldn't be gay, but then they're gay themselves. And they're just well, what do I do? So a lot of people have to deal with that because of media portrayal and because the media portrays LGBT people as comedic reliefs.
Another way I see the media portrayal is that some people see it as really easy and you just automatically know your identity, and in others it's this really traumatic experience that's way harder than it actually is. And I feel it causes a lot of struggles within the LGBT community because we see these portrayals on social media and everything, and you're well, if it's this easy in this film, why am I struggling, or why am I taking forever to figure out? And they also don't point out, it fluctuates over time. Your label you choose sometimes isn't the same label you go through for the rest of your life. I considered myself many things throughout my life in middle school, and it took me into my junior year to finally realize, I wasn't who I thought I was originally. This is who I am now. And I feel media, they often just make it way different than it actually is, and it causes a lot of trouble. So especially young queer kids who try to watch these films because it finally has representation, and then get kind of confused in the process of it.
We talked about this right before, but we were talking about the Netflix show Umbrella Academy, because I love that show. It was a fun show, but the queer character who would casually put on a skirt and got PTSD from Dave in the army was a druggie and a mess, and that's how so many characters are portrayed, is they have to be the psychotic, crazy character that they don't need to be. It's a normal human thing, and I don't understand why it has to be so outlandish, especially since they had Ellen Page as the main character. especially since they had such an openly lesbian, amazing actress, and having a lesbian villain would have been so compelling and it would have been so mainstream, and I don't understand why they had to avoid that so heavily.
And I think kind of what, our lovely other panelists were kind of hinting at is that we see two extremes when it comes to media representation of the queer community. And that's something that I should have said about terminology, but the use of the word queer is one of those ones that I think Sophia, you said about how you ask people because you never know what they're comfortable with. Queer is a word that historically was used as a slur. And so you never want to refer to the community as the queer community because you don't know if everyone's comfortable with that word. And so I love that you brought that up. But we see two extremes with portrayal. We either have the comedic relief, gay best friend sort of character, or we have the trauma-riddled, AIDS narrative gay character. And then with trans characters, we see a lot of what we refer to in the community as trans torture porn, which is like trans folks who go through like conversion therapy and everything centers around their medical transition and it's all very traumatic and stressful. We don't need these extremes. I talk about this a lot with my girlfriend and my sister about how we need to be critical of the media portrayal that we get of this community, but we also need to acknowledge that sometimes it may not be the best portrayal, but hey, at least it's a start. We talked about this a lot with The Danish Girl when that came out because they cast a cis male actor to play a trans female character, and that's not okay. That effectively continues the narrative that trans women are just men in dresses, and that's not what they are, right? But it was one of the first major media representations of a trans narrative that focused not just on the medical transition, but also aspects of social transition, aspects of relationships through transition. So while it's important to be very critical, it's important also not to be hypercritical and accept the fact that this is a start, we're getting somewhere, this is progress from where we've been. So media, it's a tricky conversation with this community because they're never gonna do it right. We're always gonna have like a cishet screenwriter behind the scenes who's like, yeah, this is gay representation, and all of us sitting here are like, absolutely not, that's not what our life is like. But it's a start. At the very least, they're starting to tell our story.
Are there any trans directors in the community?
The two women, the two women who created The Matrix are both trans women. So The Matrix is trans, you guys. Like, I hate to break that to you, but it's a trans narrative now. But other than that, I'm not familiar with any other writers or directors who are trans.
And just launching off from that point, one of the best nonfiction pieces that I've seen of the evolution of gender was when National Geographic did Gender Revolution, and that is freely available on their website. And I think what they aired was a 2-hour special done by Katie Couric, again, I believe cisgender, again, so you're getting not necessarily a trans, navigator there. Are you aware of any other nonfiction pieces? I'm taking a course through Coursera in the University of Minnesota Medical School right now that is free online, but it's a course, right? So it's I'm trying to think of nonfiction and or fiction that would help our audience.
We talk a lot about, when we're doing education and outreach, some of the resources available through like YouTube. Like BuzzFeed has some fantastic stories documenting the journey of people coming out, and a lot of folks document their transition on YouTube, and so they'll post like 1 week on T, like 2 months on T, 3 years on T, and you get to see that progression. That's really exciting. What's important to note about Gender Revolution is while you're having a cishet narrator, you're learning with her, and she's interacting with folks within our community. She interacts with like a married older trans woman who transitioned years in her marriage. She interacts with a college-age GSA that has genderqueer and gender nonconforming folks in it. She, takes the time and the effort to interact with not just Western LGBTQ folks, but also international LGBTQ folks.
Like within the Fa'afafine.
The Fa'afafine and the Hijra, I think she talks a lot about the Hijra in the documentary. But it comes across better to a cishet audience because sometimes information is better delivered from a voice that you resonate with. And so for like my parents who walked into this community not knowing anything, getting to see that documentary and learning alongside another person who knew nothing about the trans community was really empowering for them, where they could see the progression of her using all the wrong words and her saying everything wrong, and then at the end of the documentary she gets it, she's an ally. And seeing that progression is really helpful. I totally 100% recommend it.
And she seemed humble in it also. I mean, she seemed to have a lot of humility. Is there anything else that we should say about gender? I just wanted to tack on where could, if our audience is interested in going and learning more, that would be a place they could go in the media. But is there anything else?
I think that there are a lot of resources, like in the school library. If you look for them, like there's an entire shelf that has like LGBT books, and there's also like fiction that has LGBT characters. And I've read a couple of really fantastic books that very accurately portray LGBT relationships in a way that isn't like fetishizing or like weird, and like the writers themselves are gay or trans or whatever the case of the story may be. So if you want to learn more, there's resources available right at our fingertips. And, it's easy to say that like, oh, I know enough, like it's fine, like they can just do their thing, I know enough, I don't really like need to know much more about this. But if you make an effort to actively like try and find out more about the community, it means so much to the people in the community themselves, because it shows that you care and that you're fighting on our side, It's just like, any political movement, it really helps to have support from the other side. And I think it would be great if you look.
So I want to go on with that when you said like it meant a lot when people try to learn more. And so I passed out a lot of pamphlets yesterday, with a lot of information on it. And I kind of got a little teary-eyed yesterday because so many people came up and asked me for like explanations and like, a little more clarification. And it's like so many students who like I typically wouldn't think, would ask me those type of questions. And like I was kind of shocked that it was both in my 3rd and 4th period classes where like people who I don't know maybe as well, they asked me for clarification. And like I'm pretty sure like anyone on this panel and like a lot of people in the LGBT community at this campus, they will answer questions and they will, provide clarification. And, I try so much to teach other people, hey, this is what you need to know, here's more information. And I try so hard, and that's what everyone else tries so hard for people to learn. And, if you just reach out to any of us, and we're not going to shut you down, we're going to be so open and so thankful that you are trying to learn more about it.
And if you are looking for resources specifically within this school, Ms. Tombook is so helpful. You guys, like, just with anything, any research project, if you're looking for something actively for the LGBT, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, she'll either find it for you, she'll know exactly where it is, or she'll know where to find it and she'll let you know within like hours. So please use the resources on campus. All of our counselors are super welcoming and super great people, and everyone is here to assist you. I don't think there's anyone on campus who would want to see harm to another person.
That's a really powerful statement, right? That this is a sharing environment. I think that's a really powerful statement. The question I want to go to next is, what do you recommend to people who are closeted in an unsafe environment? I know that's a little bit more of a challenging question, but
For me, like at home, like I wouldn't necessarily say I'm unsafe, but like my family is definitely not supportive of me and my identity. And I would honestly really recommend is that like try your best to, if you're at school, because I feel like this school is a pretty safe place for kids who are in the LGBT community. If you're, try to be yourself at school. It's not, it's not perfect, because until you're out of that, if it's at home, like until you're out of that environment at home, there isn't really anything you can do about it. So just don't come out until you're ready, because that won't, do anything for you. Just make sure you find friends who are going to support you, like no matter what. And if you're in a friend group that isn't going to support you, you should try your best to get out, because it's really gonna damage you and your mental health a lot in the long run. So even if they don't know that you're gay, and if you're positive that they make comments about gay people that make you uncomfortable, then I think you should get out of that environment as soon as you can.
We talk a lot, there's a lot of research done on aspects of found family in the LGBT community. Finding your tribe is the language that a lot of folks use. Finding the friend group that you can rely on like a family. I was raised a Jehovah's Witness, so that's not a healthy environment to grow up in if you are queer. My sister is also queer identifying, and she knew she was gay because her first crush was on our Bible studies teacher. So it's a very difficult environment to grow up in. My mom's from West Virginia, which is historically not super LGBTQ. My dad's family is military, so it was difficult. And what ended up happening with my own coming out and my own attempts to come out, I was so excited when I first found this language to identify myself, finding the word non-binary, knowing that there was a historical precedent of folks who felt like me, that I wanted to share it. But when I tried to share it, it was knocked down by my parents. So I went back in the closet, and I didn't push the conversation, and I actually remained in the closet for another 5 years. But in that time, in that 5 years, I was out at school. My sister and I reestablished our school's GSA. We, I thought once I graduated high school, I would never get to be queer again, but that's when I started doing this work, and I started volunteering with this organization, and I found a family. And then after 5 years of doing all of this, I was finally able to come out again. And it was messy and it was super gross, but this time my parents had had the time to hear the work that I was doing from the periphery. So I talked about my youth who I worked with in a very abstract sense. And so they got familiar with the terminology, they got familiar with these identities. And so after 5 years of this hinting at the conversation, I was finally able to come out again, and this time I was met with, what can we do to help? So a lot of the times, your parents, it sucks, but your parents have a trajectory for you the instant they find out that they're having you. They immediately know what they want to happen, whether you're a boy or a girl, whatever your religious affiliation is, your parents have a plan. And to have to rework that framework can be difficult, because they've had, 14, 15, 16 years to get very used to this idea that my child is assigned female, she's going to marry a man, she's going to go to college, she's going to be a doctor. This is the plan, and now you're telling them, oh, I'm gay, and your parents have to rework that narrative, and sometimes that takes time. And so for your own safety, going back in the closet is not a shameful thing to do. There's nothing wrong with being out to certain people, but not everyone. National Coming Out Day was always really difficult for me emotionally. I couldn't be on social media because all I wanted to do was share my story, but it wasn't safe. So knowing that there's no shame in not coming out, there's no shame in waiting and finding that family until you can share that information with the people who maybe aren't safe to share it with right now. Because a lot of the times, it just takes time, and that mindset will shift, right?
Another thing, when I tried to come out to my parents, I tried to come out to my mom, because my mom's, she's white, so she was, a little bit easier to talk to than my dad, who was a first-generation immigrant from India. He's really conservative, super homophobic and all that fun stuff. Anyways, I was talking to my mom, and I'm like, Mom, I was just I told you, I'm gay, and I really, this is who I am, and I've been battling this for, 3 years, and I think this is what's gonna make me happy. And her immediate response was, no, you're not. That's impossible, because growing up, you didn't seem gay at all. You just seemed like a straight person your entire life, so how can you be gay now? And as a gay person, this was really hard for me to deal with because it's like, well, if my own mom doesn't accept this, then like, what am I supposed to do? And so I had to deal with a lot of internalized homophobia because of my parents, because they were saying, being gay is unnatural, being gay is wrong, both of my parents are Hindu, and there isn't anything that they said, God doesn't want this for you, God doesn't want this for you. But it's just, if you have, if you're not safe in your family because of, religious reasons, which is in the place that I'm at right now, it's perfectly okay to be an LGBT person and be religious at the same time. You don't need to abandon your faith for the sake of the LGBT community, because that is going to cause more pain on your part, because if you're abandoning something that you feel has stuck with you for a long time, then you should really stay with that. If you're abandoning your religion because you feel like your religion is toxic and you feel like your church is not nice and it's and all that, then go ahead. But if you feel happy in your religion, then I don't think you should abandon it. I wanted to.
And on that note, because I'm going to talk apparently a whole lot, while not abandoning your religious identity for your LGBTQ identity, not abandoning your LGBTQ identity for your religious identity, the two things aren't individual. We talk about intersections of identity. We talk about there are queer Christians, there are trans Christians, there are trans and queer Republicans. No part of your identity has to be abandoned because of another part of your identity. So I love that you brought that up. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. And for anyone in the audience that is looking for a faith-based community that is very, very accepting of LGBTQ, UUs, the Unitarian Universalists, I'm in contact with a UU minister, and they do some great sex ed actually too with Our Whole Lives that is very inclusive, and it's a very welcoming community. Not saying you should abandon your faith tradition, but if you're looking for a place to be out and safe, that's a good community here in St. Pete. So, do you have any advice for someone who is going through a gender identity struggle?
Okay, so this is probably a really bad analogy, but this is how my experience with gender identity was. It was kind of more like a guess and check process, which is sounds funny, but that's how it was for me. When I was first questioning my gender, I cut all my hair off and claimed that I was a guy. That was how I did it. And then I started to realize hey, I actually liked my long hair, and I can still not be hyper feminine with my long hair, and I was appreciative of that. And it takes so much time, finding out where you fall on the spectrum. And it took me a lot of time to realize that hey, I'm non-binary. I don't care about gender because it doesn't affect me in any way. And so I can look however I want, and I can express myself any way I want because I don't care about my gender or anything like that. And so it's a very difficult process. There's no easy way to find out your gender and find out how you want to express yourself. And it takes for me, it took me a lot of time because I started questioning this in 5th grade, and it took me to my junior year to finally figure anything out. And so I just even if you do, you're questioning your gender, don't settle on something too quickly. Allow yourself time, just to see where you fall and how you want to be, where you want to go with your life.
And guess and check is exactly yeah, that's how I would have said it too. I mean, I did the exact same thing when I first was well, I'm not a girl, I must be a boy, and then masculinity is a prison, and so I hated being a boy. And so, it's I don't know what my options are, so I'm just going to go with the next thing that I know and hope for the best, and then when that's not it, I'm going to figure out the middle ground. I started recognizing a gender identity issue in 2nd grade, and I had short hair, and I always got mistaken as a male classmate, and I loved that, and I was oh, this must mean that I'm a boy. And so I was in theater, so I copied the other theater boys in our school, and I was trying to walk like them, and I was trying to use the same language as them, and it was really awkward and uncomfortable. And I realized a very similar thing. thing, that I didn't have to confine myself to masculinity to not be feminine. I could be feminine and masculine and just understand that my identity is what it is. There are some days that I wear a dress and makeup, and I used to have my hair mid-back, and then I just shaved my head bald one day. And there are some days that I wear a binder, and there are days that I wear makeup to make myself look more masculine. This is something that exists on a fluid spectrum. Gender isn't black and white. It's not a light switch that you just flip on and on. It's something that is constantly shifting and constantly evolving and changing as you evolve and change. And the way that you express your gender changes as well. I'm not the same person who I was my senior year of high school. That doesn't change the fact that my gender identity is the same, but I don't express it in the same way anymore. So not confining yourself to what you think you're supposed to because of your gender. You know, there are so many more cis and trans men who are dressing in what we deem as feminine clothing or wearing makeup, which is so exciting to see. Because boys, like I said, masculinity is a prison. Men shouldn't be expected to fit this this framework when it's not a real framework. It's fake. Gender is super fake. And so we're allowed to express ourselves wherever we want on this very fake idea. So my biggest thing is not confining yourself to one label because you think that's what you're supposed to be, and also not being embarrassed or ashamed to what we call in this community detransition, because detransition, it's gonna happen for some people. There are some people who will be on estrogen for years, and then 5 years into their medical transition realize, I'm not a girl. And there's no shame in that. There's no shame in your gender identity changing. It's okay. So that's the biggest thing. It's not confining yourself to one label and then clutching to that label because you think you have to, when gender is so much more than just a word. And so finding that word is super important, but not feeling loyal to it. So that's a big thing.
Yeah, self-knowledge and self-acceptance at every stage, I think, is critical. Right? I'm going to shift gears just slightly here and say this, because I think this is a really interesting question. Are bisexual people just people who haven't finished coming out as gay or lesbian?
No. I think for some people who are gay, they feel that that's going to be an easier transition to be able to explain to their parents. It's going to be something where they can say, oh, well, I'm only half gay. That's not what it is whatsoever. It's not saying that you're half of something. Bisexual people are a whole person, and it's not even 50-50 for the most part. And it doesn't have to be 50-50. And I think coming out as bisexual when you're not bisexual is going to present challenges that you're not going to have to face, but challenges that I personally had to face trying to discover who I was and what my sexuality is, because as I was dating a guy, it was so difficult for me with this default straight idea in my head saying, well, maybe I was never part gay, maybe I've always been straight and I didn't know, maybe I'm supposed to want to kiss my best friends. That's not straight. So, and then as I was dating this girl, it was like, well, maybe I've never been into guys, maybe I've never had this half straight part of me at all, but I'm not half of anything. I'm a whole person, I'm completely bisexual, and it's not 50-50 for me. And I think for most people it's not, and using that as a stepping off point to come out as something else, it's going to make it more difficult for you. You really have to understand who you are, and using somebody else's identity isn't going to make things easier. And it's been really supportive for me. I've only had a really supportive community personally, but it's been this internalized conflict that I've had to deal with, that using that isn't going to help you. You have to understand who you are, and using a different identity is not going to help you understand your own issues with your identity and understand who you are any better.
I had an opposite experience. Although I'm not bisexual, I originally came out as lesbian first. And so I spent the first part of my high school just saying, I'm a lesbian, like, hey, I'm gay, what's up? And so it was difficult for me because I did like a couple of guys. And I had a crush on this one guy. And his response was, I'm so glad to be close to each other because you're gay. And I'm like, oh, this sucks. Like, this is not what I wanted. Oh.
To say you're, one thing and then shift after you've introduced that idea. But there's nothing, again, like I was saying with the gender question, like there's nothing wrong with your identity changing over the years. I've identified as asexual since I was in middle school, and my girlfriend took a gender and sexuality class last semester and was like, I think you're more demisexual. And I'm like, listen, I'm not ready to have this conversation right now. So I'm 21 years old and I'm still figuring out my sexuality. And there's no shame in that. And my label may change in the future. It may have been different in the past, but nothing is a stepping stone to another thing. It's always, this is how I feel right now, and that's how I feel then, and the two things don't impact each other at all.
One thing that I wanted to kind of like bring up a little bit is that while being bisexual isn't like a stepping stone to being gay, it's completely okay to think you're bisexual and then realize later that you're gay, or think you're gay and then later realize that you're bisexual. Because like, I feel like this is an issue for like lesbians especially, because a lot of like gay girls have to deal with like compulsory like heterosexuality. Wow. And a lot of them feel like they are attracted to boys when in fact it's just like society or like I have to deal with this a lot personally. Like sometimes I'll be like, you know what? I don't think I am gay after all. I think I'm 100% straight. I'm ready to go to church, Mom. And it's just like, and then like 2 weeks later I'll be like, well, what was I thinking? And it's just like, it's an issue that we all have to deal with as a community, and it's completely okay and it's completely normal, but no one really talks about it that much. So it's okay if your sexuality changes, and I just wanted to bring that up because it does change a lot, because we're hormonal teenagers and nothing is.
I'm 21 and it's still changing.
Yeah, so just like, your identity can change, and it's okay for it to change.
This is a question of mine that I'd like to pose to all of you, if you don't mind, just because of what we're talking about here, is that as a comprehensive sexuality educator, when I'm working with sometimes very young kids, right, and with a lot of 5th through 8th graders, is explaining to them that attraction can be intellectual, and it can be emotional, and it can be physical but not sexual, right? Because we're wired as human beings to want touch, and we know that touch is really, really important. They've done those studies a long time ago showing that babies that weren't touched enough actually failed to thrive and ultimately died. So we are hardwired for that physical connection. Does any of that, thinking about emotional attraction, intellectual attraction, and physical attraction other than sexual attraction, change how you feel about your sexuality as well? Because I look at it as all one thing. Sorry, that's not a very well phrased question, but do you get what I'm talking about with all those other elements of attraction?
So yeah, and this was something that was really reassuring to me when I was trying to figure out my sexuality, because I remember being in elementary school and all of my friends being like, oh, I have a crush on Jeffrey Pellegrino, he's like so hot, and I'm like, yeah, absolutely. So there's 5 types of attraction that factor into our relationships with folks, and that's okay, and it's okay so I said I identify as asexual, I identify as asexual and romantic. Because I can see myself having an emotional attraction to people of any gender, but I've never experienced that physical attraction. And then I get asked a lot, I'm in a long-term relationship. I've been with my girlfriend for 3.5 years, which is crazy. I had a fat crush on her freshman year of high school, and I was like, gosh, this girl is so straight, but like, wow. And then senior year we started dating, so like things changed for her and for me. But a lot of folks ask me, like, how can you be asexual and in a relationship? And it's because those two things are distinct from each other. They definitely have an interplay. My romantic attraction does impact who I could potentially have an intimate attraction to or a physical attraction to. But it doesn't change the fact that, I've never experienced that physical attraction. That doesn't impact my ability to have a relationship. But it does impact the language that I use in identifying myself as a part of this community. So a lot of the times I just say I'm queer because it's easier we talk about, what's easier to define. It's easier to just say, yeah, I'm queer, than have to explain, well, I'm asexual, but I'm in a long-term relationship.
Thank you. How many minutes do we have? We have about 1 minute.
We talk a lot.
About maybe 1 minute.
Okay, I just want to say that, like, thank you guys for, like, coming to this, even if you're not part of the LGBT community. Like, thank you guys so much, because it means so much for us that you're here and trying to learn about it. And if you feel like you're questioning your identity, you're questioning your sexuality, and you, like, don't know who to talk to, I'm sure anyone up on this panel would be more than happy to answer any questions, or just to, like, be your friend, because, friendship's a pretty cool thing. So, yeah.
I want to say really quickly, as like the adult in the room who's so floored by this whole thing, when I was in high school, there were students flying Confederate flags on campus. So to see that progression, to see that growth and development, it's so exciting, and you all are so articulate and well-spoken and capable, and I'm thrilled that I get to interact with you all and get to hear a little bit about your stories, and I'm thrilled that you all are sitting here. So yeah, absolutely. Like, I can't say enough about this campus. I think you all are super elite and irritating, because I went to Poway. But you have better scores than us, and it irritates me. But thank you for being here, yeah, absolutely.
And then a real quick shameless plug. I am going to be the GSA president next year, and I have tons of PowerPoints and resources and activities that I plan to do next year to educate not only the LGBT community, but the straight community on this campus as well. And I'm so excited to share my resources and everything I know. And if you have any questions, ask any of us, we'll answer it. And yeah.
I just want to say really quick, like the OG lesbian Ellen, be kind to one another.
I think we're done.
I know, a huge round of applause, amazing. Great conversation. I'm sorry I have to cut it short. Thank you for being here. Enjoy the rest of your day.